Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the More Survivalist, and man, this is gonna be one of those longer videos. I tried doing this one several times already and I always spend like half an hour, something like that. I do want to take the time to go into these things in detail because I think it's worth it. So this is gonna be my commentary based on something that I saw. It was recommended by the algorithm there in YouTube. This is from, I want to get their name right, from John Lovell's Warrior Poet Society channel. And he talks about how the title of the video is Why We Are the Weakest Generation of All Time. Now, the first thing I don't quite understand if he's talking about why we are as Americans, as this is the weakest generation of Americans of all time, or he's talking more of a global term, like we are the weakest generation of humans entirely. That would be one of the first things I don't quite understand. And I agree with many of the things he says. I don't agree with some, so that's why I'm doing this video. And I think that the difference in concept here, in some of these key aspects, it's important for you guys. So he talks about why we are all little kings, like entitled people that believe they deserve more than they actually do, that they're super special and unique little snowflakes, and they should be treated like that, like little kings. He also talks about we are chocolate soldiers, like soldiers that seem to be brave, but being chocolate melts with the slightest little bit of pressure or heat. It's all your fault. So he goes into this thing of accountability and taking responsibility for yourself, your own actions, owing up to that, which, yeah, definitely agree with that. Of course, courage has died, he says, and we do not mourn her. So right off the bat, one of the first things he mentions and he starts talking about is how hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and that's kind of like a vicious circle of its own. So I see how this would seem logical, and maybe in many cases it is, and in many cases it probably works that way. But here is where I think he's mostly talking about the American society rather than more of a global level. Because if you look outside of what is the developed world, if you look at something that's not United States, Canada, Europe, and especially Western Europe, and Australia, New Zealand, and a couple other exceptions, the rest of the world is a pretty damn tough place, man. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you do if you get the chance. And if you haven't experienced it in the flesh, that's awesome for you. But if you think of the rest of the American continent, Latin America, Mexico, all the way down, it is tough. It is not easy. I'm from Argentina, Latin America. I have had the experience of living in other places, fortunately so. Lived in the United States as a kid, emigrated, left Argentina, moved, lived in Europe in a couple places and such, and traveled quite a bit. And I'm telling you, the way people live in most of Latin America, most of Africa for sure, if not all of Africa, most of the, all of the Middle East, Asia, with few exceptions and few, around the globe, people are very fortunate, but most people live in tough, hard conditions. So when he talks about hard times making strong men making good times, it's not always that case. It's not always the case. You actually have several generations that are still living in hard, tough times, and it apparently never gets much better. And these are hard people. Usually the average person in the third world is going to be a lot more resilient, a lot tougher, a lot stronger, certainly mentally, and many times even physically capable of enduring discomfort to something that a lot of people in developed countries would probably not be okay with, so as to put it that way. But that doesn't mean that these people are going to be creating a better future for themselves. So that's one of the first things that I think it's actually incorrect. It's not that strong men or tough men create good times. You also need to have not only strength, fortitude, of character, of will. You also need smart men. Above all, you need people, and you need an entire group of people that are willing to make a great sacrifice so as to change that reality, not only for themselves, and probably not for themselves at all. Make a sacrifice that they're not likely to see the results of in the future. So you need people that are committed to that famous greater good in the true sense of the word, changing the society as a whole and the way of thinking completely. Just being tough, just being strong does not reassure that that place is going to be getting any better. And it's also the case of the opposite. You have, whenever I think of like a successful society that got it right, I always end up looking at Switzerland. Those folks got it right, and they've been getting it right for a long time. They've nailed it. They have a successful society. It's not, sure, you could say that the average guy in some crappy part of the world is going to be tougher. Yeah, maybe, probably. You could say that. Going to be more resilient, sure. But these folks are not particularly weak, and they're definitely smart in terms of reassuring that that way of life they have sustains itself through time. They've been living in a very high standard of living, one of the highest in the planet, for a very long time. They've managed to achieve that, and it's being sustained. It's not that this, weak society, and we could argue maybe that's not weak at all. It's actually something of a strong, successful society. It's not, and those are in fact good times. Those are good times that manage to not create weak men. So that would be one of the first things I disagree with him. Look, I was talking, and before I go on, I just want to mention for people that are interested in all of this stuff, as I always promote my own books, if you're interested in the kind of thing you learned living that way, my first book, The Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse, based on my experience in Argentina. Way more time than I wish I had spent there. As much as I love my country, I have to say that too. And street survival skills, a more practical aspect of keeping yourself safe in times like these, in situations like these, or in what you're seeing right now in the United States, and probably useful for a number of other things. But talking about that sort of stuff, talking about this way of living, we were talking actually with my wife and my oldest son, now a full-grown adult, and about possibility of him visiting Argentina on his own and such. And I was like, sure, but keep in mind, it is a difficult place. It's a tough place. It's a hard place. Things are not. And he was like, you are so street savvy and such. You're from the streets. And before I even answered, my wife told him, yes, we are like that. We've been brought up like that. You have not experienced that to the same degree. He did live before we left, he was already it's like an older kid, I guess, but as an adult, he hasn't lived like that. And it is also true that once you get used to not living even as an adult, once you get used to not living like that for some time, you start getting softer, you start getting more, more trusting, less alert in many ways. Even though I try, I do this. This is a way of life for me. This is what I do. This is literally my profession. So even then, it's unavoidable. It's like when you're one of those fishes that live deep in the sea, and then you're brought to the surface, and the pressure is different, and you're used to being at a higher pressure, and you simply end up changing nonetheless. So my wife was telling him, no, you just don't understand what it's like. You don't understand what it's like to always be alert, always be worried, because someone is probably going to be out there to get you. Every time you're out there in the streets, someone is likely, it happens all the time. It happens all the time to people all around you. The chances of you getting mugged are super high compared to living in a much safer society, where, especially in particularly safe countries, some of the safest countries in the world, they live in a different damn dimension. It is completely different. Now, in a place like Argentina, you could get carjacked, you could get mugged at gunpoint at any time. Even when you're in your home relaxing like normal people do, whenever you hear something, you're worried about someone trying to break in, and many times that's exactly what's going on. So no, if you haven't lived like that, you just don't quite get it. This would be one of those things. He also talks about how people have all these riches, and this is something I like to make the strong point here about how I don't agree with him on these things being signs of wealth and a prosperous society. He talks about how we are spoiled. Again, I'm not sure if he's talking about himself, his society, or in a more broader context, but how people, I guess, are spoiled because they have access to ibuprofen, buying medication if you need it, or just going to the store and buying food. I guess that applies to most people. you don't have to go hunting and such. So you just go and buy food, whatever it is you want, or having vehicles as a luxury, or power and air conditioning. Now, several of these things he mentions, these are not examples of prosperous, rich, successful societies. It's actually quite the opposite. When he talks about access to food, and I find that a lot of Americans make this association, which is incorrect. It's factually incorrect. You can go check it out this yourself. Whenever I see someone say, "Man, I'm surrounded by damn land whales all over the place, all fat people around me, we are so rich and we have so much," it's actually not true. That's actually not correct. When you see a lot of overweight and morbidly obese fat people, that's a sign of poverty. That's a sign of how things are not going well economically. Listen, it's not only in the developed world, even in the third world, if poor people tend to be a lot more overweight than wealthy people. Wealthy people are in pretty much across the board in developed countries or in third world countries. Wealthy people will be mostly fit, thin, healthy, eating well, working out, but you're not going to be seeing the same level of morbidly obese or very fat people. That is a sign of poverty. That's simply because the poor person lacks the education, the resources, probably doesn't know how to have a healthy diet, probably doesn't even have the money to access better quality food even. The organic stuff, the good protein, healthy food, they're going to be focusing mostly on what? On the crappy stuff, on junk food. And, they lack the education even to make good decisions. Even with a, tighter budget, you could do better for yourself and not eat that crap. But these people, it's usually the case. And you know what? When you go to some of the wealthiest countries on the planet, some of the countries that have some of the better standards of living in the world, check like the top 3, top 5 countries with better quality of life. You go to these places, you look around and you realize, damn, everyone is pretty freaking thin and fit and in good shape. They hit the gym pretty often apparently, or they're quite slim. You don't see people super overweight. It's actually very few that you're going to be seeing in some of these places. That is a sign of wealth. The opposite is not true. Same thing for having a car. You can have cars are not particularly expensive, especially not in developed countries. In the third world, it's most the case that, yes, sure, in the third world, cars are a lot more expensive than in developed countries. So you have to keep that in mind. The same car that in the United States maybe costs whatever, in Latin America, it's going to be costing 3, 5, even 10 times as much. Wouldn't be rare to see something like that. So you can have someone that's pretty poor and still have like a couple of trucks and some third or fourth even vehicle. Cars are not really all that expensive. So it wouldn't be one of those indicators to keep in mind. In terms of access to healthcare, this is something you definitely want to take more notice of. And this is something we've talked about here in the channel quite a bit, how the big pharmaceuticals, the big corporations working at a global level, not just in the United States, they take advantage any way they can, and often they will have a level of collusion with governments in terms of getting away with stuff about bleeding you dry even, in ways in which it's actually not common in our parts. Listen, I am not American myself. I don't live in the United States, and still I've lost count of how many people, middle-class Americans, that had to start GoFundMe, ask for donations, ask for money because they couldn't afford their medical bills in spite of having insurance. This is not the case even in a place like Argentina, where they have next-level corruption and poverty as a country even. That same guy living in Argentina with a crappy, awful public service would be better off likely. Not only that, if he had the private service, the private healthcare available in these places, he would be much better off without any doubt. And this is a hot button topic. I know that a lot of people have no idea what I'm talking about will go, no, you're so wrong. No, I'm actually right. I know what I'm talking about. I've seen this countless times, especially this thing about people going bankrupt for pretty common disease. It's something that should be well within what is understandable for a human being to experience in his lifetime. Going damn bankrupt over these things, that is just not right. And it's actually talking about this level of corruption and collusion between the elite big company and the government officials that should have your best interests in mind rather than the ones of the lobbies that are financing them, right? These groups that finance the lobbying between politicians and these corporations, when in fact the politicians should be representing you, the guy that voted him. Well, it doesn't work really all that much, especially in this case. Healthcare would be one of those things that I think is key, and you should understand this. And talking about air conditioning and electricity. Electricity is something that pretty much all over. If you go to even the shanty towns in Latin America, you will see like a shack with a couple of wires illegally connected to the grid. So access to electricity, and even when John Lovell talks about you have air conditioning and you just change the climate around you just by push of a button, which is true, and it would have been more. I mean, it's magic compared to what someone had in 1500s or whatever time period you can think of. But this is like food, back 500 years ago in some lost tribe, the fat guy would have been wealthy. No longer the case. Air conditioning for a shack that has hooked illegally or semi-legally even to by this I mean a connection that it's not going to be taken away because of political reasons. So he basically steals electricity from everyone paying for it, but he's going to be having a shack, a satellite TV, and likely an AC unit on the side so as to keep his shack cool. And he probably has a big flat screen TV in there, which is, none of these are signs of luxuries because these are still poor people. And I have a background in architecture. I can tell you for a fact, just building the cheapest possible box and sticking an AC on the side, that is not much of a housing. That's not much of a good design. When you have a good design of a house, proper construction for that climate, you have brick, mortar, cement, strong, solid building. It's going to be with high ceilings and windows and natural ventilation that's going to be cooling itself nicely. You have marble floors or ceramic or something that keeps the house cooler. You don't need much AC at all to begin with. I'm talking here from experience. When that's the case, when things are properly built, it cools itself nicely, even in warm tropical climates. And even if you have AC in the house, you don't actually end up using it much. Honestly, maybe a couple days, some of the warmest days of the year. But if not, naturally the house cools itself if it's properly built, properly designed, properly made. Now, if you have the cheapest stick frame box you could get away with flipping in the current market in the United States, and you stick an AC on the side, is that a sign of luxury? And look how well we have it. I don't think it's the case. It's all of these are signs of things that a lot of people, and I hear this especially from a lot of Americans, thinking that look how well we have it, and this is not particularly something that's going to be showing a higher standard of living by any means. A few more things. He talks about the lack of personal accountability. That's something I definitely agree with. We whenever you're looking for someone to blame for whatever reality you're involved in, whatever life you have, and things are not going your way, look in the mirror. That's 99% of the chance of the cases, the one that is to blame. And in the same way, if you're looking for someone to fix the reality that you have and you're living, look in that same mirror, because that same person is the only one that making some smarter, better decisions is going to be getting you out of that. It's about accountability. It's about responsibility for your actions and your decisions, and that would be one of the strong, important points. I definitely agree with him. Now, he also says that you cannot change the system, you can only change yourself. I wouldn't agree with that. I think that it's not easy, but it can be done. And in the same way, the system is, and there's several systems going on, but the one we just mentioned about how the corruption between big corporations and the government, and we suffer that here with tech companies like the one I'm using, this platform itself, how they collude and work along with government, and they're public for something, they're private when it's convenient, and they basically get away with whatever crap they're working on. This is a system that can be changed. It's just a matter of having enough people being strongly, believing strongly in doing so. And the same way it was built to begin with, it wasn't always the case. the way in which corporations buy politicians and lobby so as to get their way, get away with whatever they want, it was not always the case. That's a system that was created, and the same way it was created, if people dedicate and work hard enough so as to change it, it can be changed. Not easy, of course. It's always easier to change yourself rather than changing the entire world. And maybe not the entire world, but these systems of corruption that cause quite a bit of harm, and you definitely would be better off without them or with these changes. Absolutely. So yeah, I feel pretty strongly about that too. And also one of the things, I haven't written here, just don't want to forget anything. So yes, it is all your fault. Yes, that's kind of the way it is, and you're the one that's going to be changing that if you work hard enough, if you make those better decisions. In terms of the chocolate soldier thing, and he was talking about skin thin people, that you cannot have you cannot agree to disagree or have a different opinion. And in fact, it's true. It used to be that you could think a certain way, I could think something else. And if you were smarter, more evolved people, you could have actually a debate, a discussion, criticize one another, analyzing, not just being stupid, ranting like hateful people like it's done these days. The idea that today critical thinking is just destruction and humiliation and canceling the other person. No, critical thinking is something else. It's a lot more evolved than that. It's analyzing and coming to conclusions, and sometimes even changing your mind, if you can believe that. But this is all something that's unfortunately very much lost. Again, I don't see this being nearly as bad in the rest of the world as it is right now in the United States. It's particularly bad, guys, for you over there. It's just the way it is, and I think you see that a lot clearer when you're from the outside. You look at what's going on, and it's hard to believe even. So when he talked about chocolate soldiers, the first thing that came to mind, at least for me, was the case of a Black Rifle Coffee Company, a company that was specifically designed so as to market and target the conservative, right-wing, pro-Second Amendment gun owner. That was clearly their target, and it turned out that the company and the president of the company was financing and donating money to Hillary Clinton, of all people, and the Democratic Party, and the worst gun grabbers in the U.S. Political circle. And this is something that shocked a lot of people. Guys, big lesson here. You cannot afford to be this naive anymore. This is one of the things we were talking about with my son and my wife. The level of distrust, how careful you have to be, how it gets to a point where the window it gets very small, and any mistake you make in this level can come back and bite you in the ass. And this is exactly what happened with people with this company. You're making an effort of buying expensive coffee because that's the way it is. It's not particularly good, but people bought mostly. I'm pretty sure that 80% of the people buying that coffee were doing so as to support something they believed they supported as well. Not that their money was going to be going to the donations to freaking Hillary Clinton, of all people. So this is a big deception for folks. And it was made even worse when the president of the company came out with a statement saying that they're a vet and military company, making with a clear distinction, like, we support vets, we support military. We're not specifically supporting you, average Joe Blow with a six-pack of beer and being pro-Second Amendment. That is not the thing, because he specifically did not mention that they support the Second Amendment. We support the military, we support vets. And a lot of people would assume that, well, yeah, they are on our side. It's not always the case, guys. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know who's who here, because it's so easy to be deceived and tricked into believing something else. And just thinking that because someone likes guns, he's on your side, that is another big mistake, and that's being super naive and innocent as well. You cannot afford to do that anymore. I've even seen in gun forums people go like, well, it's good that BLM is carrying guns on the streets, they're gonna be pro-Second Amendment, or whatever commie left-wing Marxist group going around these days, these Antifa guys armed on the streets. Well, they're gun owners now. No. These are not like-minded people. Just because they have a gun doesn't make them like-minded people. This is like a criminal breaking into your house with a gun. He's not your friend. He's not your pal. He's not on your side. He just happens to have a gun, which actually makes him more dangerous. But he's not going to be supporting your rights. In fact, if we you look at history and events around the world, in fact, these are the people that are going to be going against the Second Amendment, taking away your guns while keeping their guns themselves because they're going to be aligned with a regime that is oppressing you, all right? And they keep their guns, same thing in Venezuela. You have convicted felons, criminals, murderers out of jail, handed an fully automatic AK-47 for them to do their patriotic duty, which is basically oppressing the opposition and actually, eliminating them from society. So don't be so naive. You have to be smarter than that. Okay, guys? And finally, trying to wrap this up, this idolizing victimhood. The idea that the more boxes you tick of victimize, in the victimized sheaf, the more of a higher moral ground you stand on. Like if you're a blue-haired, overweight lesbian land whale that has brown, black, yellow, or purple, whatever thing you can just tick on that box and claim to be an oppressed group, that gives you more power in the world, in the way the public opinion in the United States considers you now. And this is just wrong on a number of levels, but the idea that, even in essence, the idea of you considering yourself more of a victim, that gives you more status and more power in the eye of the public, that is a pretty dangerous way to view things. But it's unfortunately the way it is. Look, there's the guy from CNN, with the black gay guy, Don Lemon, or whatever his stupid name is, completely ranting with hateful racist narrative against white people. All white people are racist. You are inherently racist because you're white. You're privileged because you're white, and you don't even know it, but you are. This is the kind of thing you would see in pre-World War Nazi Germany, guys. And you only have to change the group that's being oppressed, but the narrative, it's the same damn thing. The idea of collective punishment, the idea of everyone of a certain ethnic group, everyone of a certain religious group, or whatever it is, but collectively you are bad, you are evil, you're worse than others, you're just something that's bad of society simply because of the color of your skin. If you let this get away, if you let these people get away with this, you'll only have yourself to blame when they start throwing you in, I'm not gonna be calling them gulags or concentration camps. Let's say these re-education places where you're cleansed from your white supremacy software that you have pre-installed just because you happen to be white. This is as twisted, as evil as it gets. Same thing for the woman from Chicago, the mayor from Chicago, saying that she's not going to be granting interviews to white people. Are you crazy? If you changed white people for any other group of people, that would be condemned publicly, and that person would no longer have a career, if not having criminal charge brought against them for discrimination against people. You should not, and as a public official, it should be downright illegal for a public official to say and actually do, not just saying, but actually exercising this discrimination against people of a certain color of skin. Yet they get away with. And it's so twisted because, Don Lemon, homosexual guy living with a man, the mayor of Chicago, lesbian, black woman living with a white woman, they obviously don't have a problem having sex and sleeping in the same bed with these people. That says a lot of how twisted their minds and how sick they are truly. Because if you hate people, if you hate white people so much, you actually live and go to bed with one, yet that's what they do, and it just says a lot of how sick these folks are. But it is terribly, also so hypocritical of them. Don Lemon claiming to be a victim, oppressed minority. Dude, you're a damn multi-millionaire. Not only are you extremely wealthy, you also have a voice every single day. You have a microphone and a camera to say whatever stupid crap you want every single day. You know, you have a public presence like few people in the entire country. So what kind of victimhood are you talking about? What kind of oppression are you talking about when you're a millionaire with a microphone, with a network so as to say anything you want all day long? What kind of oppression is that? Anyway, guys, that's basically it. I think it's interesting and important to understand these things because these things have a direct implication in your way of life. You know, and this is a problem specifically. I truly believe this is particularly bad in the United States. It's bad in other places. Some countries are worse off than others. I think that John Lavelle mentioned a recent trip to UK in England or London. UK would not be the perfect example as of what the rest of the world actually is. Most of the developed world actually has a lot of those. Yeah, guns, the ones you cannot have in none of those you can have legally in UK. You can have like a bolt action, so it would be like a semi-automatic reduced to bolt action working, which is sad and pathetic, but it's the only thing they have legal over there. But if you look at some of the better off countries, some of the wealthiest, better societies, most evolved and higher standards of living, they usually have lots of those. Sure, it may be a bit more paperwork, but you can have them. Actually, I think that those two, you would need the stamp and $200 or $300 and wait for quite a while before you could either have either one in the United States. And you know, I actually doing a bit of paperwork. You just have it in a couple days. So guys, don't let the left trick you and lie to you as of what life is in our places, and try to be a bit more objective. You know, subtract yourself and try to look at this from an outsider and think for a second how crazy all of this is. Folks, it's going to be all for now. See you on our next video. Now, have an awesome day. Take care.